Master Sergeant Rebecca Hayes had served her country for 18 years. At 42 years old, she had seen deployments in 3 different countries, trained hundreds of recruits, and earned more commendations than she had space on her uniform to display. But on that Tuesday morning at Fort Davidson in rural Georgia, none of that seemed to matter to Captain Derek Paulson. Rebecca arrived at the training yard early, as she always did. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky orange, and the air still held the coolness of night. She had been assigned to evaluate hand-to-hand combat techniques for a group of new officers going through advanced training. It was routine work, the kind she could do in her sleep. Captain Paulson strutted onto the field 15 minutes late, surrounded by 3 other young officers who laughed at everything he said. He was 30 years old, fresh from a cushy assignment in Washington, and he carried himself like someone who had never been told no. His father was a 2-star general, and everyone on base knew it. "Well, well," Paulson announced loudly as he spotted Rebecca checking her equipment. "They sent us a grandmother to teach combat skills. What's next? A cooking class?" The other officers snickered. Rebecca had heard worse in her career. She straightened up, meeting his eyes with calm professionalism. "Good morning, Captain. We're scheduled to begin at 0600. You're late." Paulson's smile faded. He didn't like being corrected, especially not in front of his friends and certainly not by a woman. "I'll decide when we start, Sergeant. In case you forgot, I outrank you." "Yes, sir," Rebecca replied evenly. "But the training schedule comes from Colonel Martinez, and he outranks both of us." The other officers exchanged glances. One of them, a young lieutenant named Chen, looked uncomfortable, but Paulson's face darkened with anger. "You've got a mouth on you," he said, stepping closer. "Maybe someone needs to teach you some respect." Rebecca stood her ground. She had dealt with bullies before. They were all the same, whether they wore civilian clothes or military uniforms. "Sir, with respect, I'm here to conduct training. If you have a complaint about my performance, you can file it through proper channels." What happened next occurred so quickly that several people later disagreed about the exact sequence of events. Paulson moved forward as if to demonstrate a combat move. But instead of following proper training protocol, he swept his leg out hard and fast, kicking Rebecca's feet out from under her. She hit the ground hard, her shoulder taking the brunt of the impact. Pain shot through her arm and back. The dust from the training yard rose around her in a small cloud. "Oops," Paulson said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Guess you should have been paying better attention, Sergeant. Combat is dangerous after all." Rebecca lay there for a moment, stunned not by the fall, but by the deliberate cruelty of it. She had trained thousands of soldiers in takedown techniques. She knew the difference between a training accident and an intentional attack. This was no accident. As she pushed herself up with her good arm, she saw Lieutenant Chen step forward to help her, but Paulson waved him back. "She's fine. Aren't you, Sergeant? Tough as nails, I'm sure." Rebecca got to her feet slowly. Her shoulder throbbed, and she could already feel it swelling. But she kept her face neutral, refusing to give Paulson the satisfaction of seeing her pain. Around the training yard, about 20 other soldiers had witnessed what happened. Some looked shocked, others looked away, unwilling to get involved. "We should continue with the scheduled training, sir," Rebecca said quietly. Paulson laughed. "I don't think so. You're clearly injured. Clumsy fall like that? You might want to see the medic. In fact, I'm ordering you to report to the clinic. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself further." It was a dismissal, and they both knew it. Worse, it was a dismissal that made it look like Rebecca was weak, incapable of handling a simple training exercise. She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. Arguing would only make things worse. "Yes, sir," she said through gritted teeth. As she walked toward the clinic, her shoulder burning with each step, she heard Paulson's voice carry across the yard. "That's what happens when they lower standards to meet quotas. Some people just can't handle real military work." Rebecca kept walking. She had survived roadside bombs in Iraq and ambushes in Afghanistan. She had earned her rank through blood, sweat, and more tears than she cared to remember. But in that moment, walking away from that training yard with her dignity stripped away by a spoiled officer who had never seen real combat, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt powerless. But Rebecca Hayes had not survived 18 years in the military by giving up when things got hard. As she pushed open the clinic door, her jaw set with determination, she made herself a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Part 2. The system. The clinic was busy with the usual morning rush of soldiers nursing minor injuries and requesting sick call. Rebecca sat on an examination table, while Dr. Sarah Kim, a captain she had known for 3 years, gently probed her shoulder. "It's badly bruised," Dr. Kim said, her voice tight with anger. "Rebecca, what really happened out there?" Rebecca had already given the official story to the nurse. Training accident. Lost her footing. But Dr. Kim wasn't just her doctor. They had served together on a medical relief mission in Haiti after the earthquake. They had shared stories about their families, their struggles, their dreams. "You know what happened," Rebecca said quietly. "You've been on this base long enough." Dr. Kim's hand stilled. "Paulson?" Rebecca nodded. "That arrogant—" Dr. Kim caught herself, glancing at the door to make sure it was closed. "Rebecca, you need to report this. What he did was assault, not training." "With what proof?" Rebecca asked. 20 soldiers saw it happen. And how many do you think will testify against a general's son? Chen looked like he might have said something, but the others? They'll back Paulson's story. They'll say I was careless, that I couldn't handle the training." Dr. Kim started wrapping Rebecca's shoulder. "So you're just going to let him get away with it?" "I didn't say that." Rebecca winced as the doctor adjusted the wrap. "But I know how this works. If I go to Colonel Martinez right now, without proof, without witnesses willing to speak up, it becomes, he said, she said. And guess whose story the brass will believe?" "This is wrong," Dr. Kim said. "Yes," Rebecca agreed. "But the military doesn't always reward people for doing the right thing. You know that as well as I do." Dr. Kim finished the wrapping and stepped back. "I'm putting in my medical report that this injury is consistent with deliberate force, not a simple fall. It's not much, but it's something." "Thank you," Rebecca said. She spent the rest of that day on light duty, relegated to paperwork in her office. But her mind wasn't on the forms she was signing or the requisitions she was approving. She kept replaying the incident in her mind, looking for options, for angles, for some way to make this right. By evening, word had spread through the base. Rebecca heard the whispers in the mess hall. Some people were sympathetic. Others seemed to believe Paulson's version of events. A few suggested that maybe Rebecca was getting too old for field training, that maybe it was time for her to consider a desk job. Those words stung worse than her shoulder. That night, Rebecca sat in her small quarters, looking at the photographs on her wall. Her graduation from basic training, young and fierce and ready to take on the world. A picture with her unit in Baghdad, all of them dusty and tired, but smiling. A commendation ceremony where she had received a Bronze Star for her actions under fire. She had earned her place in this military. She had proven herself again and again. And now one entitled officer was trying to erase all of that with gossip and humiliation. Her phone rang. It was her daughter, Amy, calling from college in North Carolina. Rebecca almost didn't answer. She didn't want Amy to hear the defeat in her voice. But Amy was persistent. "Mom, you okay? You sound weird." Rebecca found herself telling Amy everything. About Paulson, about the kick, about the whispers and the looks and the feeling that everything she had built was crumbling around her. Amy listened quietly, and when Rebecca finished, her daughter's voice was firm. "Mom, you taught me never to let bullies win. You told me that when I was getting picked on in middle school, remember? You said that bullies count on good people staying quiet." "This is different, honey." This is the military. There are rules, chains of command, and there are also regulations against assault, Amy interrupted. Mom, you're the strongest person I know. Don't let some jerk with a famous daddy make you forget that. After they hung up, Rebecca sat in the darkness for a long time. Amy was right. She had spent her whole life standing up to injustice, fighting for what was right. Why should this be any different? She pulled out her laptop and began documenting everything. The time, the date, exactly what Paulson had said and done, who had witnessed it. She wrote down every detail she could remember. Then she sent a formal email to Colonel Martinez requesting a meeting. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the colonel's office at 0800 sharp. She wore her dress uniform, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. Her shoulder still throbbed, but she stood straight and tall. Colonel Martinez was a career officer, 55 years old, with a reputation for being fair but tough. He gestured for Rebecca to sit down, but she chose to stand. Master Sergeant Hayes, he began, glancing at his computer screen. I received your email. These are serious allegations. Yes, sir, and they're all true. Martinez leaned back in his chair. I've also received a report from Captain Paulson. He says you were demonstrating poor technique and refused correction. He says you fell because you weren't following safety protocols. Rebecca's hands clenched at her sides. That's not what happened, sir. Were there witnesses? Yes, sir. At least 20 soldiers saw the entire incident. And have any of them come forward to support your version of events? The silence that followed was answer enough. Martinez sighed. Sergeant Hayes, you're a decorated soldier. I respect your service. But without corroborating testimony, I can't take official action against a superior officer based solely on your word against his. So he gets away with it, Rebecca said, her voice flat. I'm not saying that. Martinez stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the base. I'm saying this needs to be handled carefully. Captain Paulson's father has significant influence. If we pursue this without solid evidence, it could blow back on both of us. Rebecca felt something inside her turn cold and hard. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. With all due respect, sir, this is exactly why things never change. We're so worried about protecting ourselves and avoiding political fallout that we let bullies do whatever they want. That's not the military I signed up to serve. Martinez turned to face her, and for a moment she saw something like respect in his eyes. You're right, but I still need proof. Find me witnesses willing to testify. Find me evidence, and I'll go after Paulson myself. Until then, my hands are tied. Rebecca left the office knowing exactly what she had to do. If the system wouldn't help her, she would have to help herself. Rebecca spent the next week moving carefully. She went about her regular duties, endured the whispers and the pitying looks, and pretended that everything was normal. But every free moment, she was working on her plan. She started with Lieutenant Chen. He was young, only 26, but she had noticed something about him during the incident. While the other officers had laughed or looked away, Chen had looked uncomfortable. That discomfort might be the crack she needed. She found him in the gym one evening, working through a solitary weight routine. She waited until he finished his set before approaching. Lieutenant Chen, do you have a moment? He looked up, startled, then nervous. Master Sergeant Hayes, sure. They moved to a quiet corner of the gym. Rebecca kept her voice low and calm. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable. I just want to know what you saw last Tuesday during the training exercise. Chen's eyes darted away. I saw you fall. That's all. That's all? Rebecca kept her tone gentle, non-accusatory. Lieutenant, I've been training soldiers for 15 years. I know what an accident looks like, and I know what assault looks like. You know the difference too. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Even if I did see something else, what good would it do? You think anyone will believe me over Paulson? His father is General Paulson. I'm nobody. You're a soldier, Rebecca said. That's not nobody. I'm a soldier who wants to make captain someday, Chen replied, meeting her eyes now. I'm a soldier who has student loans and a mother who needs help with medical bills. I can't afford to make enemies with people like Paulson. Rebecca understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. What if you didn't have to testify publicly? What if there was another way? Chen frowned. What do you mean? Does your phone have video capability? Of course, but I wasn't filming. Chen stopped, understanding dawning on his face. Wait, you think someone might have recorded it? There were 20 people there, Rebecca said. In this day and age, someone probably had their phone out. Or maybe there's security footage from the training yard. I just need to find it. Chen looked around to make sure they were still alone. Then he pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. He wrote down a name and number on a piece of paper from his gym bag. Private Marcus Webb, Chen said quietly. He's one of the recruits who was waiting for his turn in the exercise. I saw him put his phone away quickly when Paulson looked his way. I can't promise anything, but maybe he got something. Rebecca took the paper. Thank you, Lieutenant. I didn't do anything, Chen said, but there was relief in his eyes. And Sergeant? Be careful. Paulson has a reputation. This isn't the first time he's had complaints, but they always seem to disappear. That last piece of information made Rebecca's blood run cold. She wasn't Paulson's first victim, she was just the latest. Finding Private Webb took some detective work. He wasn't assigned to her unit, and she had to be careful about approaching him. The last thing she needed was for Paulson to find out she was investigating. She finally caught up with Webb in the mess hall 2 days later. He was a skinny kid, maybe 22 years old, with nervous eyes that reminded her of a frightened rabbit. Private Webb, I'm Master Sergeant Hayes. Can we talk privately? The kid looked like he wanted to run. Ma'am, I don't want any trouble. Neither do I, Rebecca said. But I need to know if you have video footage from last Tuesday's training incident. Webb's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Private, I'm not here to get you in trouble for having your phone out during training. I just need to see what you recorded. I could get in serious trouble, Webb whispered. Paulson, he's got connections. What if he finds out? Rebecca leaned in closer. What if he does this to someone else? What if the next person he kicks doesn't get up? Private, I'm not asking you to testify. I'm not asking you to put your name on anything. I'm just asking you to do the right thing. Webb was quiet for so long that Rebecca thought she had lost him. Then he pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I was filming my buddy across the yard, he said quietly. He was goofing around, and I was going to send it to him later, but I caught your whole incident in the background. I didn't mean to, and when I saw what happened, I was going to delete it, but you didn't, Rebecca finished. No, ma'am. Something about it felt wrong, like it should be documented. He pulled up the video and handed her the phone. Rebecca watched, her heart pounding. The footage was distant and a little shaky, but it was clear enough. There she was, standing professionally, talking to Paulson. Then Paulson stepped forward, and his legs swept out in an obvious, deliberate kick. The force of it was unmistakable. This was no training demonstration. This was assault. Can you send this to me? Rebecca asked. Webb nodded and transferred the file to her phone. As she walked away, she felt the first real hope she had felt in days. But hope was a dangerous thing. That night, Rebecca was working late in her office when she received an unexpected visitor. Sergeant Major Thomas Grant was the senior enlisted advisor on the base, a man with 30 years of service and a reputation for not taking nonsense from anyone. Master Sergeant Hayes, he said from her doorway. We need to talk. Rebecca stood. Sergeant Major. Grant closed the door behind him and sat down without being invited. His face was serious. I've heard things about you poking around asking questions about Captain Paulson. Rebecca's heart sank. Sir, I'm just... I know what you're doing, Grant interrupted, and I'm telling you to be very careful. Paulson's father has already made calls. There's pressure from above to make this whole thing go away. If you push this, they're going to push back harder. So I should just accept it? Let him humiliate me and move on? Grant was quiet for a moment. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to be smart about this. Do you have evidence? Rebecca hesitated, then nodded. Good. Then here's what you're going to do. You're going to take that evidence directly to the Inspector General. Not Colonel Martinez, not the chain of command here. The IG is independent. They can't be influenced by Paulson's father. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. The Inspector General was the military's internal watchdog, responsible for investigating corruption and misconduct. It was a big step, one that couldn't be undone. If I do that, she said slowly, there's no going back. No, there isn't, Grant agreed. But sometimes the only way to fight a rigged system is to go around it entirely. Your call, Sergeant. After Grant left, Rebecca sat alone in her office, Webb's video on her phone, the decision weighing on her like a physical thing. She could file the complaint with the IG and risk everything, or she could delete the video, accept the humiliation, and hope Paulson left her alone. She thought about all the soldiers who had come before her, the women who had fought for the right to serve, to be treated as equals. She thought about her daughter, watching to see if her mother would stand up for herself. And she thought about Paulson's other victims, the ones Lieutenant Chen had hinted at. How many others had he bullied and humiliated? How many had stayed silent because they were afraid? Rebecca opened her laptop and began typing her formal complaint to the Inspector General's office. Her hands didn't shake. Her resolve didn't waver. She attached the video file and hit send before she could second-guess herself. Whatever happened next, at least she could say she had fought back. The Inspector General's office worked faster than Rebecca expected. Within 48 hours, 2 investigators arrived on base. They were quiet, professional, and impossible to read. They interviewed Rebecca for 3 hours, going over every detail of the incident and asking questions that sometimes felt like they were trying to trip her up. Master Sergeant Hayes, the lead investigator, a stern woman named Colonel Patterson, said near the end of the interview, "You understand that filing a false complaint against a superior officer is a serious offense?" "Yes, ma'am," Rebecca replied. "And you understand that I wouldn't risk my career and reputation on a lie?" Colonel Patterson's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "We'll be in touch." The next few days were the hardest of Rebecca's life. The presence of IG investigators on base sent ripples through the entire command. Everyone knew something big was happening, and it didn't take long for people to connect it to the incident with Paulson. The reactions were mixed. Some soldiers quietly expressed support, leaving notes of encouragement in Rebecca's mailbox or catching her eye with small nods of solidarity. But others were openly hostile. She overheard conversations in the mess hall about how she was a troublemaker, how she couldn't handle a little rough training, how she was trying to ruin a good officer's career. Paulson himself was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, but his friends and supporters made sure Rebecca knew they blamed her for it. She found her car keyed one morning. Someone left a dead rat in her office. Anonymous emails arrived calling her terrible names. Dr. Kim checked on her regularly. "How are you holding up?" "I've survived worse," Rebecca said, though she wasn't sure that was true. Combat was straightforward. You knew who the enemy was. But this was different. The enemy wore the same uniform, worked in the same buildings, ate in the same mess hall. A week into the investigation, Lieutenant Chen showed up at Rebecca's office. He looked terrified, but determined. "I gave a statement to the IG," he said without preamble. "I told them what I saw." Rebecca felt her throat tighten. "Lieutenant, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Chen said. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being a soldier, not nobody. If I can't stand up for what's right, what's the point of wearing this uniform? Chen wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, 3 other soldiers came forward with their own statements. One was a female lieutenant who had been harassed by Paulson months earlier but had been too afraid to report it. Another was a sergeant who had witnessed Paulson's aggressive behavior in other training situations. Private Webb, despite his fear, also gave a statement and turned over his video footage officially. The investigation expanded. The IG team discovered that there had been 2 other complaints against Paulson at his previous duty station, both of which had been buried by his father's influence. They found a pattern of behavior, a history of bullying and harassment that had been covered up time and time again. But Paulson didn't go down quietly. His father, General Paulson, arrived on base and demanded meetings with everyone up to and including the base commander. Rebecca heard through the grapevine that he was threatening careers, calling in favors, doing everything in his considerable power to protect his son. "It's not going to work this time," Sergeant Major Grant told Rebecca during one of their quiet conversations. "The IG doesn't answer to him, and the video evidence is too clear to ignore." Still, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that somehow Paulson would slip through the cracks. Men like him always did. They had money, connections, and the arrogance to believe they were untouchable. Then came the day Colonel Patterson called Rebecca into a conference room. The IG investigator's face was professionally neutral, revealing nothing. "Master Sergeant Hayes, I wanted to inform you personally of the results of our investigation." Patterson opened a folder. "Based on the video evidence, witness testimony, and a review of Captain Paulson's service record, we have substantiated your complaint. Captain Paulson will face a court-martial for assault, conduct unbecoming an officer, and several other charges related to the pattern of behavior we uncovered." Rebecca felt dizzy. She had hoped for this outcome, but part of her had never really believed it would happen. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me," Patterson said. "You did this. You stood up when it was hard, when it was dangerous, when it would have been easier to stay quiet. That took courage." The investigator stood and extended her hand. "Off the record, the military needs more soldiers like you, Sergeant. People who remember that integrity matters more than politics." Word of the court-martial spread through Fort Davidson like wildfire. The reactions were even more divided than before. Paulson's supporters claimed it was a witch hunt, that Rebecca had manipulated the system. But